and it's not doing anything. Oh, it says it's being recorded. Okay. Ah, there it goes. It just took it a few seconds to start up. All right. I suppose you guys want me to share too. Alrighty. So today we're going to talk about max transfer size and jumbo frames. But first, as usual, since it's been like, what, 2 or 3 weeks since we've met on this topic, let's have us a little review. V, what is trace flag 3004?
It gives the execution plan for backup. It gives all the information.
Right. And
Backup or restore operation. Yeah.
right. Yeah, whenever, let's agree that whenever we say backup, we mean backup and restore unless otherwise specified.
Yes. Yeah.
PC, how about 1806?
Disables the IFI.
Nice. V 3605.
It logs the output in error log.
Okay. And 3604 PC.
Writes the output to the console.
Okay. And 3213 V.
It gives information about memory usage of backup operation.
Right. We'll just say resource usage, huh?
Yeah.
Alrighty. And PC, how do you turn on IFI?
And it's in SQL. Go to perform volume maintenance and add the
Exactly.
SQL
Good.
service account.
And V, that takes effect as soon as you do it, right?
After no, after
We need
SQL
to.
bounce.
The other V.
Okay.
Say
We
it again,
need
V.
to restart the service. We need to
Oh, okay.
restart the service.
Okay. Why is that?
Um, because we are giving permission to the service account, so it will take effect once we restart.
Well, yeah, that's very tautological of you, but um, why only on why do we have to wait to restart? Because we just gave it permissions. Why didn't it just kick in?
Mm,
PC?
It's just not something on SQL, but it's how it interacts with OS. So
Because SQL only
everything, all
checks
the
for
assembly
those
stuff
permissions
involved.
on restart, on startup.
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. And PC, when would you use format?
Almost every time.
Exactly. But assuming that that's not the case, what would make you want to use format?
Whenever we change the number of the backup files.
Okay, good. V, what's the role of the log file size in tuning? Why do we care about the log file size?
Um, um, the bigger the log file, the recovery time of the database would be higher because it will be zeroed out anyhow. All right. So if the larger the file, the higher time it would take for recovery.
Okay, okay. Um, let's see. I'm gonna double up on you this time because I gave him the last question about this. So V, assuming you don't have access to the OS, how can you find out if IFI is enabled?
We can check in SQL Server error log and check the startup messages, startup sequence messages. There we can find out IFI is enabled or not. And it logs into error log.
Does it actually say IFI is turned on?
Okay, we can do one thing. We can create an empty database and see whether the data files were zeroed out or not.
Okay. And how would you do that? What would that statement look like?
Mm. We trace off 1804 first, like just to be sure, and then create database.
What was that first? What was that first statement you said? Just to be sure, what?
The trace flag for
Uh-huh.
disabling IFI. So just to make sure.
Oh. You want to disable IFI?
As of now, will. Yeah. Sorry.
But you're trying to see if it's turned on. If you disable it, that's not going to tell you anything.
So, yeah, we can just check the status of 1806 for disabled.
No.
And if it is disabled, we enable it.
Why? If you enable it,
So that
then you're
when we
disabling
create
it for your session, right? If you enable it, then you're disabling IFI for your session.
No. If the 1806 is on, we will make it off, and then we will create the database.
Okay. And do you think that'll do it?
Create database and
PC, do you agree with her?
Yeah. No need to do that. It was only for testing purpose. We can directly enable 3604 with 3004. Oh, that's for this one. Yeah, we directly create a database and see it in error log, and if it is more than the version of SQL is higher than 2016, it actually logs into the error log whether IFA is enabled or not.
Right. And if it's not, and if it's lower than 16?
Um, if we can get from
What if you want to see the, what if you want to see the message? What if you want to see if it's actually zeroing out your data file?
right, enable 3004 and then create a database, watch out in the error log whether the data file is zeroed out or not on the creation of
Right. So,
database.
turn on 3004,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
V,
Yeah.
do you agree with that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Are you sure you don't want to alter anything?
Um.
What did you forget? Three thousand four
3004
and
3,000.
3605.
3605. Yeah. To the
Yeah.
error log.
For error log. For error
There
log.
you
Yes.
go.
Yeah.
Alrighty. These things work in conjunction. PC. How can you test how fast you can back up a database?
Backing up the database to null.
Okay.
So it only reads from the disk. Yeah.
Right. And V, how many sets of buffers are used to restore compress backup?
Two.
Nice. How about for backing it up?
3.
PC, how can you see how many buffers your backup is using?
By enabling the trace flag 3213.
Right.
And 3604 or 3605?
Yeah, there you go. And how can you tell how much memory your backup is using, V?
Buffer count into buffer sets into max transfer size. That is the total memory backup is
Right.
using.
Times, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this question is for each of you. PC, you start. If you could only do one thing to tune, what would it be?
I didn't get the question right. One thing to tune.
Yeah, if
Tune
you
the
could,
backups.
yeah, if you could tune your backups using only one flag, doing only one thing, what would it be?
Compression.
Okay. V, how about you?
I'll go for striping.
Okay.
Buffer count.
Yeah, I know, right? So, myself, if it were me, I'd say compression as well. Um,
Okay.
striping is good, but it doesn't do a hell of a lot without buffer count. And at the end of the day, writing less data will always be better. But that was an open-ended question. There's no real wrong answer. Well, okay, there can be a wrong answer, but anyway, yeah. When it comes right down to it, writing, 70% less data than you ordinarily would is probably the best thing to go with.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about max transfer size. So, max transfer size in and of itself isn't that big of a deal, right? When you're tuning, max transfer size actually makes the least amount of difference. It's not like, it is with striping. If you leave a default buffer count and you stripe with 20 files, because you've got like a 2 terabyte database, right? And you're gonna see, you know, you're gonna see a buffer count of like, I don't know, 15 or so, right? But then if you jump that up to 500, you're going to see a drastic difference in the amount in the speed of your backup, right? But if you take that same scenario and say you've got 500 buffers and 5 files and you've got a max transfer size of 1 meg versus 2 megs. Yeah, you'll see some increase, but it's not going to be nearly as drastic. So the transfer size gives you the least bang for your buck. At that point, it does, it serves to, simply spend more memory, right? But it's really not as big of a deal as buffer count is with striping. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't make any difference, right? Because it does. I mean, you'll see a performance input, a performance increase, and it's not necessarily trivial. It's just not as big of a deal as, as some of the other things. I've always found the sweet spot for local backups is 2 megs. The default for any database under 10 megs, I think, is 64K. The default for TDE databases is 64K. And that's TDE databases with a single data file. Now, there's some caveat here. And you see that we're rolling into the TDE section here. So when you back up a database with TDE, it doesn't really give you that good of a compression, right? Because, encrypted data doesn't compress very well, because compression really relies on repetition, right? It's basically it's basically dictionary compression, and it relies on repetition. And with encryption, you just don't get that, right? In fact, the data is expanded, right? But starting in 2016, if you set the transfer size larger than 64K, it kicks in what's called more of an optimized compression algorithm, right? So what usually happens pre-2016 is when you back up a TDE database, it just compresses, it just does its best to try to compress the encrypted data. But at 2016, if you specify a transfer size larger than the default 64K, then it decrypts the page. Then it compresses it, and then it encrypts it again. So it's actually compressing in the backup itself. It's actually encrypting the compressed version, which makes it a lot better. Do you understand the difference?
What was the last line?
Do you understand the difference?
I missed it. I missed
Okay,
it.
so let's say, for example, that you've got data A, B, C. C, right? And let's say that encrypts to OX, right? Something like that, right? This is a very sloppy example, but you get the idea, right? So let's say it encrypts to that. So by default, SQL will, when you've got compression on your backup, it will try to compress this, right? So that's really kind of, right? You're not going to get very good compression there because all of your encrypted values are going to be different. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. So not only do I have I gone from 3 characters to, like, 17 or whatever this is, right? But it's gonna be a lot harder to match these up for them to be compressed during your backup because there's not very much repetition there. And there's not going to be much repetition with other data on the page as well. So, compressing a TDE database isn't very useful most of the time. So I want to make sure you understand that before we move on. Do both of you get
Yes.
that? Okay,
Got
good.
it.
Good. So that's why, when you have a TDE database, compressing doesn't do much good for you, right? Because you're trying to compress this instead of compressing this. But in 2016, if you have a max transfer size of over 64K, which is in the statement would be 65536, right? Because you got to change that to bytes. What it does is it unencrypts it and turns it back into ABC. Then it compresses ABC. Then it turns around and it encrypts that compressed version of ABC. So it decrypts, compresses, and then re-encrypts that compressed version. So you get much, much higher compression ratio that way. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the difference between pre and post 2016. But that only kicks in if you specify max transfer size over 64K. Now, somewhere along the line, I'd have to look it up, in 2019, they took that away, right? Max transfer size isn't required anymore to kick in the optimized compression algorithm. So if it's specified with compression, or, you know, if compression is used any way it's used, right, whether from SP config or from the statement, right, then it'll kick that in automatically. So they're saying, you know what, you said you wanted the backup compressed. We're gonna use the compression, we're gonna use the enhanced compression algorithm regardless. Cool?
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody explain this back to me. PC, explain to me why compression doesn't play well with TDE.
Compression basically happens for the repetitive values, repeated things. Whereas the database have the compression enabled on it. Every value of, though it's repeated, it's encrypted with a different value, which is quite large than the value itself. So,
Right.
Encrypting, compressing that value actually doesn't give much of compression to the end output.
Exactly. And V, why is the optimized compression algorithm in 2016 so much better?
The optimized compression works like it will first decrypt the values, decrypt the encrypted values, then it compresses, and then it again encrypts. So, yeah, so it works on the original values, so it will be much better.
Exactly. Very nice. Y'all
A
are
question
out.
on this. So, is the backup taken after 2019 for optimized compression? Will it be taking longer time than the normal backup?
Probably. Yeah.
Alien?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, you know, it's got to decrypt and all that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how significant it will be. I suspect that's going to depend, right? But yeah, it'll take some. It takes extra time, sure. Okay, so the reason why I put that in with max transfer size is because, you know, because pre 2019, it depends on max transfer size, right? How does it
Yeah, but
depend on
what's
how does it depend on max transfer size?
if it is
The max
more max transfer size is more than 64 MB, then only it kicks in.
Right,
The optimized compression. Yeah.
right. Anything else on this before we move on to jumbo frames?
But what's the relation of max transfer size? Like, why they have kept this limit? Is there
I don't know.
any logic?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if I had to guess, and I apparently do, um, I would think that what they wanted was to kind of like what we do with default values and SPs, right? Um, where you know, we don't want to break the input contract, so if we add a new parameter, we'll give it a default value, right? My guess is that maybe they didn't want to change the default behavior. And since it's going to default to 64K for a TDE, then they said, you know, okay, fine, we'll default that behavior. But if somebody specifies a max transfer size, then we'll go ahead and kick in the new behavior. That's just a guess. Um, I'll send I'll send a message to the masters list and see if anybody knows why that's tied to max transfer size. But off the top of my head, that's what I got.
Okay.
Okay. So let's get into jumbo frames because this covers an area that's not only covered very little in backup tuning, but we haven't touched it at all. So, I love questions like this. There are two types of backups. What are they?
Tuned.
I love it. Yes. No, in this case, it is local and network,
Network. Okay.
right? So
Okay.
I can
Yeah.
back up to any local drive, or I can back up to a UNC share, right? Or a mapped drive that's still UNC, right? It's just mapped locally to your profile. So when you're doing max transfer size locally, you got no problems, right? You can set the max transfer size to hell, let me think for a second. You can set it to 2 megs and be just fine. You can set it to 4 megs and yeah, you'll get some improvement over 2, but I haven't ever found it to be enough to really concern myself with, right? But the 4 megs really kicks in over the network, right? So if I'm backing up directly to uh, a SAN or a NAS or just some other server's disk, right? Which I've had to do before. You kind of like everybody else's backup, right? Then this starts to kick in. So what I usually do for really large backups over the network is I give them a max transfer size of 4 megs. But there's a caveat here. You have to make sure that jumbo frames is turned on. Now, that's easier said than done because it doesn't rely on just you. But first, let's look at jumbo frames to begin with. Right here. And you guys are still seeing this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I come into my network configuration here, and I go to change adapter options, and I go to my Ethernet right here. And I see here this says tap Windows adapter V9. That's kind of virtual thing, I think, for VPNing. But if I go to my actual adapter, and this one's unplugged because I'm using Wi-Fi, but the setting will still be there. So you go on to properties, and this is something you don't see people do very much. Configure. Ooh, we're gonna configure it. Go to advanced. Now, some people call it jumbo frames, or I'll say some manufacturers call it jumbo frames. Some call it jumbo packet. And some call it jumbo something else. I can't remember what, but you get the idea. It's almost always jumbo something, right? And if you set that, you can set it to 4 megs or to 9 megs. I like to set mine to 9 if I'm going to go ahead and do it, right? Let's go ahead and do that, right? So we'll set it to 9 megs. That means that your packet sizes can be up to 9 megs, right? Now, if you've got jumbo frames disabled, and you do a network backup, and you've got a max transfer size of 4 megs, I think the default might be 2 megs, but don't quote me on that. It's been a long time, and it probably is based on manufacturer, right? But let's say for now that it's 2 megs, right? And you've got your max transfer size set to 4 megs. Well, then your network max transfer size is going to be 2 megs, right? There's nothing SQL can do about that because that's set at the adapter level, at the NIC level. Do you understand that so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, here's the kicker. your Nick jumbo frames can easily be overridden the same way that your max transfer size is overridden. If you're going through a router that has its jumbo frames set to 2 megs, and you've got yours set for 9 megs, well then, clearly, your max transfer size is only going to be 2 megs, right? Because that router will only take 2 megs. So, what you need to know about this is whenever you enable jumbo frames, every router along the way, router, switch, whatever you're going through along the way, every touch point along the way also has to have jumbo frames turned on, and it has to be set to what yours is. Or else you will just be dialed down to the lowest one in the chain, right? If you go through 3 different routers and 2 of them have jumbo frames set to 9 and one of them has it set to 1, guess what? Your max transfer size is 1. Period. So everybody in the chain has to agree on what the transfer size is going to be, right? It's kind of like if I have a piece of chain and I want to attach it to another piece of chain, and I use kite string to tie the 2 together, right? My chain has the effective strength of that kite string. So whenever you use this, you have to talk to the other groups. And again, you've got a big caveat here that you need a downtime for this because the connection needs to be bounced after that. So you need to take it offline and then back online again in order for this setting to take effect. So it's not something that you can do. You can just change, right? It's gonna, cause a service interruption. It'll only be brief, hopefully, but it's still going to cause a service interruption. So this is something that needs to be planned ahead, but I'm telling you, if you're backing up large databases over the network, it's worth it. Because you can see significant performance increase with jumbo frames turned on. That's all I have on that topic. Any questions?
So, will this be effective for the machines in cloud? Because we attach new disks, so we don't know where the disks are actually in.
Yeah.
Should we consider them as DAS or network disk?
Yeah. I don't know. I really don't. My guess is it's probably it's probably not configurable at that level. I'd have to ask Sean D. If it's configurable at that level. And I'll get back to you. But my gut tells me that it's not, so you're probably just at the mercy. But yeah, you're right. We don't know where those disks are. And we don't know anything about it. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to, I'll have to get back to you on that specifically. Hell, he may not even know. I may have to go to like AWS support or something for that.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I'll try to find an answer for that. And I knew the second I said, any questions? I knew somebody was going to ask me about cloud. I was like, damn it, don't ask, don't ask, don't ask, don't ask. No, but that's fine.
Maybe similar question. If it's not DAS, but it's a VM. In the VM as well, we have the storage coming from the SANs, which is kind of again not a SAN, but VSD. It's a storage. That's all. So
Yeah.
how does that behave in those?
Right. So and yeah, there are lots of little hybrid scenarios here. So I'm gonna say if it's something like that, it probably doesn't matter because you're probably not going through any Well, yeah, because you've got RAID controllers. You usually got RAID controllers for a DAS, and you use the NIC for a SAN. So yes, I would enable it for a SAN because it is officially going over the network, even though it's usually a private network. So yeah, I would enable it for a SAN, but not for a DAS. And if it's a VM, it's going to depend on where the disk is. If it's a local disk on the host, then I don't know. It depends on how the hypervisor works. If it sees that the host is a local disk, even though it's a network disk to the um, to the client. So I would have to test that one honestly to see because there are different hybrid configurations there. So yeah, you're gonna have to test that on your own
Okay.
because
So,
yeah, it's gonna
will
depend on the
our max
hypervisor.
transfer size changes after that?
I'm sorry?
How can we actually find it gets faster after we change these things? What
Right,
parameter
right.
actually changes?
Yeah, there's a statement. Let me see if I can find it because it's a command line statement that you can use to test the route. Um, Let me see if I can
Tell
dig that
me.
up because it's been years since I've had to do that. Let me see if I can find it. And here, I'm going to put that in the notes here. I'll say, I'll say, ask about um, cloud and Dumbos and statement to see uh, size and DOS. There we go. So yeah, it's been so long since I've had to do that, but yeah, I believe there is a way to see what your effective transfer size would be.
Okay.
Anything else? And by the way, Very good questions. You're looking ahead. I like that. All right. If nobody has anything else, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and we'll call that class, huh? All right, let's see if I can